So I'm going to try to give you some guidance here that will help you understand the readings both in Module 4 and more generally as you read forward through the book Homeward Bound by Elaine Tyler May. First of all, it will help you to understand that Homeward Bound fundamentally is about a concept that historians and sociologists would call ideology. Ideology is a concept from sociological theory, and historians use it as an intellectual tool. So what is ideology? Why is it useful as a concept? An ideology is a set of conscious and unconscious ideas and assumptions that individuals make about the world. As humans, we learn ideologies socially, through interactions with other people. So they're not something that one person just comes up with. An ideology sets up three basic things for a person. It sets up their goals, their expectations, and their actions. And I'll give you an example of that in a moment. Ideology is also normative. That is, it tells someone what goals they should have, what expectations they should have, what actions they should take. When we're thinking historically, we use the concept of ideology to allow us to talk about a particular historical system of assumptions and values. When we describe something as an ideology, we do this so that we can talk about those ideas and assumptions without implying that we personally believe that those ideas are correct or incorrect. We practice putting aside our own personal opinions about those ideas so that we can describe how they worked. The concept of ideology is a tool that lets us get some intellectual distance so that we can see how things have changed or stayed the same over time. So, how do you recognize an ideology? Ideologies can take many forms, and they often include assumptions about social categories like race and gender. A racial ideology might be a set of ideas and assumptions about skin color and how a person's skin color should shape their goals, expectations, and actions. A gender ideology is a set of ideas and assumptions about how women and men should act, what women and men should expect, and what goals women and men should have. Racial ideologies and gender ideologies work together in complicated ways. As you read Homeward Bound, pay attention whenever Elaine Tyler May describes expectations about white families and African American families differently. When she's doing that, she's describing Americans arguing over the meanings of race and arguing about how power and economic goods should or shouldn't be distributed according to skin color. Another way to recognize an ideology is that it's internally consistent and hard to see the outside of if you're part of it. So, for example, this is kind of long, but bear with me. The ideology of white supremacy as practiced in the Jim Crow South between, let's say, 1880 and 1960 or 65 or 70 had a bunch of ideology attached to it. One of the core parts of the ideology of Jim Crow white supremacy had to do with sex. So Jim Crow racial segregation kept the races separate because the people who believed in it assumed that there were fundamental differences between people with European ancestry and people with ancestry from other parts of the world. The elaborate system of racial segregation was fundamentally designed to keep the races socially and sexually separate. Most historians would say that the idea of protecting white women's sexual purity was at the core of legalized segregation. They've also pointed out that the ideology of racial segregation included assumptions about black men, particularly an assumption that all black men were potential rapists and were interested in raping white women. Jim Crow white supremacy also made other assumptions about black women and about white men and about their sexuality, but I'm not going to digress into those right now. You'll see this eventually. So from the outside, decades after the end of legal racial segregation, the ideology of Jim Crow white supremacy isn't one that most Americans today would embrace. But it's important for us to understand how it worked, because we can't think about 1950 and about the mindsets of white Southerners and black Southerners in 1950 unless we can think about the different components of ideology. Ideologies are slippery. They can change slowly or quickly over time, and some of them hang on longer than others. A lot of the time, culture is a major tool for spreading and reinforcing ideologies. So, For studying the middle of the 20th century, we can look at popular media, speeches, and ordinary people's attitudes as a way to understand the ideologies that were common then. So now I'm going to talk about ideology and how it shows up in Homeward Bound. So Elaine Tyler May's book, Homeward Bound, is an entire book about one particular ideology called containment. As you'll see, the idea of containment started off as a concept in international politics and foreign policy. When you read George F. Kennan's diplomatic telegram about containment from 1946, you'll understand what it meant in the context of U.S. foreign relations in the middle of the 20th century. Broadly, the ideology of containment said that international communism, as a political and economic system, was trying to spread throughout the world, and that the United States must stop its spread. The ideology of containment included its own assumptions and ideas about what a good economic and political system should look like. And especially as you read Chapter 1, see if you can figure out what those ideas and assumptions are. As you read Homeward Bound, you'll see that Elaine Tyler May doesn't see containment as purely an idea about foreign policy or foreign relations. She argues that the ideology of containment showed up in American culture and in the lives of American families. As you get deeper into the book, you'll see her making an argument that World War II changed a lot of things about American society, particularly the roles of women, and that after the war ended, an ideology she refers to as domestic containment took over. According to her, domestic containment encouraged American white middle-class men and women to find all their happiness and fulfillment within family life. And she says this was a change from the world that these people's parents had experienced and the world that their children would experience. As you read in this module and in the future, try to build up a picture in your head of what the ideology of containment looked like in U.S. foreign relations. Also, try to build a picture in your head of what domestic containment looked like in the experiences of American families. When you do that, always look for the elements of ideology, ideas and assumptions that set out normative standards for people's goals, expectations, and actions. As much as possible, try to find specific examples of this, and write them down when you see them. Keep track of the page numbers where they show up. This will take practice. It's not something you're going to get right away. It will take weeks. But once you learn to see an ideology, it will change everything about how you view the world, both in the past and in the present. So this is a very worthwhile exercise.